7 games. Alabama goes 3-9. Oklahoma goes 10 games under 500 in a 5-year stretch. Young college football fan, yes, it could happen. And you know what? It actually has happened more recently than maybe some of you would think. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love. Best discussion, debate, and analysis each and every day right here. Please lock it in. If you love college football, please subscribe, like the videos, comment, and share them on social media as well. We're looking at elite programs and the top programs in college football historically and when they were down. What do I mean when I say down? Well, right now we've got elite in college football, and I don't think there's any questioning 3 programs are definitely elite right now. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma could be elite depending on the definition. I will not go into that right now. LSU, of course, coming off a historic season at 15-0, but that's just one season, but it is a national championship. So right now, those are the elite of college football. Definitely, again, the Buckeyes, the Tigers, and the Tide. All right, what would it take for any of the elites, whether that be currently or the blue bloods of the past, to be down? This is not a textbook definition, but for me, of course, if you're elite, you're competing for national championships, not necessarily winning national championships. Only one team can win the national championship, but you are on the verge. You are competing for national championships. To be down, to me, is not competing for conference championships. If you are not seriously competing as a top program for conference championships, then you're down. What I mean is you're going into the last weekend or the last 2 weekends of the season with a serious chance, serious challenger for the conference championship. All right. And to be down, it's got to be for a period of time. If you're humming along at 11-10 and 12 wins per year, year after year after year after year, and you go 7-5, and then you, bam, jump back out to a 10-win season, 12-win season, that was not a down period. That was an aberration of one season. That was a cycle, maybe lost some really close games. So if Oklahoma goes 7-5 this year, they're not down until they go 7-5 again, or 6-6, or 8-4, over and over and over and over. It's got to be for 3 or 4 years to be down. Again, is that the definition? No, that's my definition. Would love to get your comments down in the comments section about what it means to be elite, what it means to be down. For me, again, it's elite competing for national championships. Down for those type of programs that are expected to compete. You're not competing for your conference championship seriously. So here we've got the top programs in college football and when they were down. Again, if you love college football coverage, discussion, debate, and analysis, make your recommendations, your requests right here, and I will cover your request and also make sure you subscribe. All right, let's start with what has been the king of college football since a certain coach took over in Tuscaloosa by the name of Nick Saban. Alabama, the gold standard since 2008. Well, you've got post-Gene Stallings and you've got pre-Nick Saban. So PS and PS, post-Stallings, pre-Saban. Gene Stallings, the coach that won a national championship in 1992, the one prior to the Nick Saban era. So from 1997 through 06, that's not a season or two, 10 years in Alabama, they went 67-55. That's marginal. Break that down to a one-season average, and it's somewhere between 6-6 and 7-5. 67-55 for the Tide for those 10 years. 39-41 in the SEC. Consider, as recently as 2006, Alabama, can you imagine season after season after season playing 500 in the SEC, below 500 in the conference? That was under Mike Dubose, Dennis Franchione. You had Mike Price, of course, the infamous quick stay in Tuscaloosa, and, of course, Mike Shula as well. I remember it well. There were also 3 different NCAA probations during that time, 1997 through 06, and then Nick Saban takes over, and it becomes the #1 program in college football. But Alabama definitely down between 1997 in 06, despite winning the SEC right in there with Sean Alexander at running back in 1999. All right. How about LSU? The program Nick Saban built, then left to go to Alabama and begin that dynasty. We now consider LSU to be a top program, and LSU is a top program. And even before winning the national championship this year, a disappointing top program and losing 3 and 4 games a year between the appearance in the 2011 BCS championship game and the national championship run of last year. LSU, top 5 talent every year, losing 3 and 4 games. It might surprise you that LSU was not a great football program prior to Nick Saban arriving in 2000. So Saban arrives in 2000, turns the program around. In the last 20 years since Saban took over, then Les Miles and now Ed Orgeron, LSU has won the SEC 5 times with 3 national championships, and they have won 202 games against 59 losses. Prior to Saban arriving for 11 seasons, 11 years, 11 long years between 1989 and 99, LSU went 58-65. That's not against the SEC. That's against the trash played in the non-conference schedule. 58-65 for LSU. Get this, the SEC record for LSU during those 11 years, 33-51. Awful. Down. Florida really hasn't been that good since Urban Meyer left. They had the 1 year under Will Muschamp when they won 10 games and went to a major bowl, the Sugar Bowl, embarrassed by Louisville that year. And, of course, Dan Mullen's done a nice job the last 2 years with 2 top 10 finishes. But after Urban Meyer left, they went through a 60-41 spell. Again, that's only winning 60 against 41. That's less than 60% winning percentage. That is not good for a big program. The Ron Zook years before that, before Urban Meyer, not good either. Between 1986 and 89, that's a 4-year run, 26-21. Marginal football. That's what you expect to hear at Kentucky or North Carolina State or Minnesota. 26-21 at Florida for the 4 years prior to Urban Meyer. And then if you want to look at really awful Florida football, go back to 1979, 0-10-1. What is that one? Young football fans, that's a tie. We had ties before 1997. That was a tie. They walked off the field at the end of the game, did not play overtime. The Gators went 0-10-1 in 1979. How about their Eastern Division rival, Georgia? An elite program. Kirby Smart has had 3 consecutive outstanding seasons. Of course, Georgia fans and others would say, hey, win us a national championship. Well, they definitely have not been down since Mark Richt took over in 2002. Say what you will about Mark Richt. He ran a solid, better than solid program, top 5 to 15 in the nation all the way through his tenure for 15 years at Georgia. They were always good, if not great. Didn't close the deal, but they were really good. Georgia's last losing season, so they haven't been down during this entire time, of Richt and Smart. Last losing season was in 1996 at 5-6. Between 93 and 96, a 4-year run of Georgia football, marginal Georgia football, 22-22 with 1 tie. And if you really want to go to bad Georgia football, 1989 and 1990, when they were really, really down. Okay, now we get to what for me is one of the more interesting programs in college football. Think about Auburn. Where is Auburn's place in college football? They're not an elite. They're arguably a second tier. Arguably a Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State second tier. Florida second tier right now. Arguably. Maybe not quite. Because look at the last 5 or 6 years of a lot of 5 and 4 loss seasons. But they go to national championship games. They've got a national championship. They're one of the few teams in the past decade in college football to own a national championship. Won a national championship in 2010, Cam Newton, Gene Chizik, undefeated national title winners. 2 years later, 0-8 in the SEC, 3-9 overall. Then they shoot back up to go to a national championship game in Gus Malzahn's first year, on the Plains and come within 7 seconds of winning a national title in 2013. If you can come up with, this is a challenge to anyone out there, because that to me is the most historic roller coaster ride of any program in college football. Winning a national championship, 2 years later, winless in conference, the next year, go back to the national championship game. Unprecedented. Then a lot of 4 and 5 losses after that. A lot of uneven seasons in which they underachieved, and now here they are after almost getting to a national championship situation in the playoff 2 years ago, 2017, after beating number 1 Alabama, number 1 Georgia, but losing to the Dogs in the SEC title game. Auburn's an interesting program. Not quite elite, but always good, like a top 10 to 15er. So when have they been down? Auburn, based on my criteria, haven't been down for a long, long time. They haven't been great most of the time. They're good. They are competing for the SEC. They've lost at least 4 games the last 6 seasons. So they, again, have not been great. And they've lost at least 4 games in 19 of the last 25 years. So that's not a lot of great seasons. 19 of 25 years for Auburn, losing at least 4 games. A lot of 8 and 4s for Auburn. Some 7 and 5s. The last time they were really down, though, really bad, 1975 to 1978, Auburn went 17, 24, and 3 for those 4 seasons between 75 and 78. Okay, let's look at another conference and the 2 blue bloods in the Big 12. Texas. Don't have to go back too far to see when Texas has been down. How about right now? Texas said they were back 2 years ago. They won the Sugar Bowl, won 10 games, and almost won the Big 12. Texas is only 41 and 26 since 2014. Is that a bad record? No, but they're Texas. They're not Minnesota. They're not TCU. They're Texas. 41 and 26, not good, including 3 straight losing seasons. Down. Texas is down. Post-Mac Brown, pre-Mac Brown. So Mac Brown forging his legacy there at North Carolina again. Definitely has a legacy at Texas. Going to 2 national championship games, winning 1. They go immediately in the toilet after he leaves. They were in the toilet before he got there. Between 1986 and 93, before Mac Brown, 47 and 42 with a tie. 500 program. Not good. 5 losing seasons during that 8-year run. 46 and 42, 5 losing seasons. Bad before Mac Brown, elite with Mac Brown, down after Mac Brown leaves. Texas football, down right now, down before Mac Brown. Oklahoma. Bob Stoops took over in 1999, turned around the program. They won a national championship in year 2. They were elite during his run. Oklahoma critics would say he lost a lot of big games. Yes, he got to big games, though, and owned the Big 12. Pre-Bob Stoops, awful. Between 1994 and 98, that's a 5-year span, Oklahoma football went 23, 33, and 1. That's the last time Oklahoma was down, the mid to late 90s. All right, let's look at the ACC. Clemson, of course, arguably the best program in college football right now. Look at the run since 2015, arguably the best. Right there with Alabama, probably a smidge ahead of Ohio State. Dabo Swinney given all sorts of credit, and he should be. In the 40 games prior to Dabo Swinney taking over, and it didn't turn around right away under him. He went 6-7 one year. They were obliterated in the Orange Bowl after winning the ACC for the first time in forever in 2011. Of course, Geno Smith, West Virginia. In the 40 games prior to Dabo, Clemson went 22-18. They were marginal. And then if you want to look at some really rough Clemson years, you don't have to go way, way back. In the 90s, Clemson had these type seasons. 5-6, 5-6, 7-5, 7-5, 3-8, 6-6. That's Not the entirety of the 90s. They had a couple good years, but that's 6 seasons out of 10 in the 1990s. Clemson, 5-6, 5-6, 7-5, 7-5, 3-8, 6-6. Not a good program in the 90s. Clemson football. All right. Elsewhere in the ACC, of course, Florida State. Don't have to travel too far back in time to see when Florida State's been down. How about yesterday? How about today, right now? Florida State down. 7-6, 5-7, 6-7 under Jimbo Taggart. And yeah, Willie Taggart finishing off, of course, with that 9-12 run before he was fired after the Miami loss last year. So Florida State right now at 10-14 in the ACC. And that 7-5-6 win run, Florida State is down right now. They weren't so great between 2005 and 2009, although they had an odd season in 2005 in which they beat Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. They lost a lot of out-of-conference games, and then they lost to Penn State in the Orange Bowl. So ACC champs go to a major bowl, take on a Penn State team that finished in the top 3 in the nation, but they lost 5 games that year. So by definition that I cited at the outset, Florida State not necessarily down that year, but it started a run of marginal football. Between 2005 and 9, that's 5 seasons. The Noles at 38-27, 21-19 in the ACC. Marginal. Not good. Now, the last time Florida State was awful, pre-Bobby, of course. Bobby Bowden built that program, and it's never been the same since. He made it historic, elite. 0-11, 1-10, 3-8 before Bobby Bowden. That was Florida State football. Miami, a similar situation. So the rival Miami Hurricanes, of course, one of the more interesting histories of college football. So if you take Miami between 1983 and about 10 years later, elite. Miami right at the tail end of the 90s, 01, 02, 03, elite. So you take about 15 years of Miami football, elite. In the last 15 years, marginal. In the last 15 years, Miami has been Wake Forest. Miami has been Pitt, to use a couple teams, Boston College, to use a couple teams and programs in the ACC right there. That's what Miami has been, Georgia Tech. Miami, over the last 2 years, of course, is only 13-13. And the program has only won 57% of its games in the last 15 years. That's a long time. That's going 7-5 for 15 years. That's Miami football. And then like Florida State, they hit the wave of the early 80s and turned it around and started to keep that Florida talent at home. So right about the time that Florida State was doing that 0-11, 1-10, 3-8, Miami 2-8, 3-8, 3-8 before Howard Schnellenberger came to town and it all turned around and they became the U. All right, finally, we make one quick stop out to the Pac-12, and of course the one blue blood out there is USC. The rest of the conference, not worth looking at. It's USC. And again, like the Mac Brown situation at Texas, it's about Pete Carroll. It's pre-Pete and it's post-Pete at USC. Pete Carroll could have won multiple national championships. His teams were right there all the time. Depending on your argument, they either won one national championship or 2, but they were always winning Rose Bowls and just an elite program with a tremendous record under Pete Carroll. Before Pete Carroll, USC was down. Make no mistake, in 60 games, 31-29. That's 5 seasons, 31-29, marginal football program. And since 2010, Pete Carroll leaving in 09, 86-45 is pretty good because there's been some really good seasons in there. They won the Pac-12 a few years ago. They won the Rose Bowl in 2016. They had a top 10 finish at 10-2 under Lane Kiffin. So it's not been all bad, but not USC standards since Pete Carroll left at 86-45. And of course, the last 2 years, 5-7, 8-5. I'm not going to say USC's down based on our criteria of competing for conference championships for an extended period of time. That you would have to go back to the pre-Pete Carroll era again, 31-29. Let's go to the Big Ten, folks. Michigan. Is Michigan down? No. Is Michigan where Michigan should be based on Michigan standards, or what we think of Michigan standards being? They should be competing heavily for championships. Well, they are. They are playing Ohio State at the end of the year, typically, to go to the Big Ten championship. They just keep losing. So Michigan's not necessarily down right now. They're winning top 10 at a top 10 level in the nation. We just know what the inevitable finish is at the end of the season. But in terms of closing the deal, Michigan down. Haven't won a Big Ten championship since 2004. 16 years. And even that year, they were sent to the Rose Bowl with a big fat L handed to them by Ohio State, 37-21. Troy Smith, Ted Ginn, Santonio Holmes. Between Lloyd Carr, who, of course, won a national championship in 97, and Jim Harbaugh, who, despite his critics, turned around 5-7 and then started winning 10 games a year. Between Carr and Harbaugh, with, of course, Brady Hoke, and before that, Rich Rod, Michigan 46-42. That's down. That's 90 games. That's 7 seasons. That's down. 46-42. So Michigan not getting it done right now, but in that 2010 range, late 2000s into the next decade, down at 46-42. All right, Penn State. Joe Paterno, like Bobby Bowden, built the program. 5 undefeated seasons, 2 national championships, but throw away the national championships. You know what we think of national championships here to a certain extent. Really, Penn State was down the last time after that whole scandal broke, the awful incidents with Jerry Sandusky, all that came to light. And Bill O'Brien turned around the program. And by Penn State standards, they weren't winning, but O'Brien did a remarkable job. We've outlined that many times here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Bill O'Brien, outstanding job getting the program back on its feet at 8-4 and 7-5. Then James Franklin came in. He went 7-6 a couple times. So Penn State was down at that point. Again, by its standards and by the standards that we give of competing for conference championships. Between 2012 and 15, for those 4 years, Penn State 29-21. Not good. Paterno also had a lull between 2000 and 04. For those 5 years, Penn State was not good. They had a one decent year in 02, but other than that, before that, they were a top 10 program. Then they had a 26-33 run. For those 5 seasons, 26-33 at the beginning of the 2000s. Then they bounced back with a Big Ten championship, Orange Bowl win, and top 3 finish in 2005. So Penn State down after the Sandusky scandal and back in 2000 to 04 for those 5 years. All right. Before we get to Ohio State, I'll slip in Notre Dame. 4-8 in 2016. That was an aberration. That was one season. Not down under Brian Kelly. But, man, they've been down. Bob Davie, they were down with him after Lou Holtz. And then certainly mediocre before and after Lou Holtz. With Bob Davie, Jerry Faust before Holtz. That was a bad run for 5 years for Notre Dame football. And then this 2007 to 11 period for 5 years recently. Notre Dame 32-31. Ty Willingham had his issues. And, Notre Dame with not a good run during that time between 2007 and 2011. Charlie Weiss was there, of course. 32-31. Last time Notre Dame was down for those 5 years, pre-Brian Kelly, playing 500 football. And then finally, we've got Ohio State. Interesting case here for the Buckeyes. We're talking about the team that has won more consistently than any program in the history of college football. The best all-time winning percentage, they just eked out Michigan just in this past season. They're right there, number 1 all-time in winning percentage. Number 1 since 1960 in the last 60 years, and number 1 since 2000. So it's not like, okay, we got to go back 100 years. No, Ohio State consistently winning. Number one in winning percentage by all those criterias. If you're talking about bad records, marginal records, look at Earl Bruce's finale there at Ohio State at 6-4-1 in 1987, and then John Cooper took over. The Buckeyes were down between 1987 and 91. 33-22 with 2 ties. Not awful, winning 60% of its games. But what's strange there is my criteria is not met, because even going 33-22 in that 5-year stretch, Ohio State was playing Michigan with the Big Ten Championship and the Rose Bowl on the line in 1989 and 90. You actually have to go back to the beginning of Woody Hayes, back in the early 50s. And this, again, wasn't even awful. 16-13-2 for Ohio State when Woody Hayes took over his first 3 teams before, bam, he won a national championship in 1954. And to find Ohio State's last back-to-back losing seasons, those were back in the 1920s. And Ohio State's last losing season was in 1988, 32 years ago. All right, my thoughts on elite programs and what it means to be down, and when was the last run of being down. Now, if you're looking at the current elites, again, I believe that to be, without a doubt, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State in that order at this point. Generally in that order. Don't jump all over me. Those 3. And then Oklahoma, LSU, and Georgia vying for, they make the argument to be elite. And if you were going to say, Mark, I'm pointing a gun at your head, who's the elite that's going to slip next? I would say Oklahoma. If the Texas talent stays in state, Oklahoma could fall. I'm not saying they're going to. I'm saying that they would be the best candidate out of the elites to plummet. And then the next elite to emerge would be what Mario Cristobal is doing out on the West Coast with Oregon. Love the discussion, debate, and analysis. Please bring your comments, like the video, share it out on social media, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.